Hello, everybody. A very happy Rakhi to everyone. Today, I'm going to read a story of mine that celebrates the special relationship between brothers and sisters. This is an anthology called Celebrate Rakhi and Bhai Dooj, and many different authors have contributed to it. It is published by Hachette. The Henna Boys. Ma finished braiding Rani's curly black hair and threaded a red ribbon into it. Jagga watched, his thin face sullen. His eyes softened when his 6-year-old sister Rani began to slip shimmering glass bangles on her little wrists. Suddenly, someone knocked. Roop, their older brother, almost grown up at 16, hurried to open the door. Is she ready? Sunita Masi, Ma's sister, bustled in. Stout, resplendent in a turmeric yellow sari, her gold bracelets jangled as she bent to kiss Rani. Come on, she said. It's almost 9 o'clock. Your uncle has to leave for work. The remaining bangles slid out of Rani's hand as Sunita Masi pulled her away. Ma hugged Rani, and Jagga, who had just turned 12, picked up the shabby cloth bag that held her clothes. Silently, he and Roop followed their aunt out of the shanty, a crude structure of old bricks roofed with plastic sheets. Her husband waited in the rutted lane, leaning against his scooter. Within minutes, they sped off, carrying Rani away. Why did you let her go? Jagga burst out the moment they re-entered the shack, already stuffy in the April heat. Roop's long, bony face became uneasy. Jagga? He put a hand on his brother's arm. Show some respect. Respect! Jagga cried. Baba never bothered about us. And now Ma's letting Sunita Masi take Rani away, as if we can't take care of her. It's just for a day or two. Ma's tired face grew pinched. Sunita and her husband planned to visit the shrine of Vaishno Devi to seek the goddess's blessings. When will Rani ever get such a chance? Jagga's eye fell on the small glass bangles lying abandoned on the mud floor. He'd bought them yesterday. That's all they could manage, he thought bitterly. A few glass bangles, resisting the urge to fling them aside. You're right, he said, turning away abruptly. We'll never be able to do anything like that for Rani. Jagga. Ma's thin hand felt heavy on his shoulder. She'll be back soon, son. Come, have your breakfast. Jagga wanted to yell out, I'm not hungry. But Ma's tearful voice stopped him. Reluctantly, he sat down cross-legged on the floor next to Roop and gulped down cold chapatis left over from last night with mouthfuls of hot sweet tea. Then Roop picked up the bag that contained the tools of their trade, plastic cones filled with henna paste, and the boys headed for the bus stop. It was almost 11 when they reached the Hanuman Mandir. Some of the other henna artists were already busy, tracing patterns on women's palms, but the brothers' place was at the end of the row, far from the temple. This meant that they got customers only after all the others were occupied. Of course, it was different at festivals and during the wedding season. Since it was considered auspicious, almost a must for women to decorate their hands with henna, there was plenty of work then. The sun was climbing higher above the tall buildings on the other side of the road. It was unbearably hot now. Who'd come out in such weather? Jagga grumbled, pushing his straggly hair off his broad forehead and fanning himself with a piece of cardboard. Patience, Roop said. See, the queues nearly reach the big tree. Jagga shrugged his skinny shoulders, almost lost in his faded, oversized shirt. The stream of worshippers heading for the temple was growing. It was Tuesday, a day sacred to Hanumanji, and this was one of the most popular temples in Delhi. The sweet sellers were doing brisk business, as were the flower sellers. Suddenly Roop said, "Why did you shout like that? You know Ma tries to do her best." Jagga frowned. "I know that," he said. "And it's nice for Rani that Sunita Masi gives her these treats we can't afford. But I'm scared, Roop, scared that one day Rani might not want to come back. You know how desperate Sunita Masi is to adopt her." His voice choked up. "Ma hasn't agreed so far, has she?" Roop said. "That's because we make such a fuss, and Rani refuses to leave us too." Roop sighed. "Maybe it might be best for her." Jagga gaped, horrified. True, Sunita Masi was much better off. Her husband worked as a driver with the government and earned a decent salary. They lived in a flat with electricity and running water. But they had no children, and Sunita Masi felt the lack keenly. That's why she kept pestering Ma to let her adopt Rani. Perhaps she felt Ma would part more readily with a daughter than one of her sons. Might even have given up if both the boys hadn't always protested so strongly. And now Roop too was saying that it might be best for Rani. Jagga felt tears sting his eyelids. How can it be best for her? He wanted to shout. To leave her own mother and brothers and live with Sunita Masi, even if she was richer. Roop continued softly, as if he'd read Jagga's mind. Jagga, I can't bear to part with Rani either, but the more I think about it, I feel we are being selfish. Sunita Masi can give us so much that we can't. I can't think like that, Jagga replied brusquely. This exchange had made his head ache so hard that it became unbearable. To distract himself, he picked up one of the henna cones. He began to squeeze out the green paste from its tip, drawing a peacock, something he had recently learned on his own palm. Stop wasting! Roop's face turned irritable. Jagga stopped with a guilty start. Then he noticed two women heading towards them. A curly haired girl dressed in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt who was skipping ahead of the two women suddenly halted. She seemed the same age as Rani. She giggled, making Jagga blush. He could guess what she must be thinking. A boy decorating his own hand with henna. How silly! His friends had made fun of him too, but they shut up when he told them bluntly that his father was in prison again and he had to earn something somehow. Besides, Roop had already begun to sit in the small bazaar near the temple. Women came to shop for glass bangles and other trinkets here after their prayers. Sometimes they stopped to have their palms decorated with henna. Their mother too had said that it was not a trade for a boy, but when Roop, who learned the art from a friend, began to bring in money, she had to accept it. They could not depend on their father's earnings, and what she made, cleaning houses, was not enough to live on. By the time Jagga joined Roop, She didn't react at all. Not bad, he heard the taller lady say. Madam, we can draw all these patterns. Roop flipped open the album that had cost so much to prepare. The women leafed through it curiously. Can he make a little appu on my palm? Like this? The girl held out the stuffed cloth elephant she was carrying. Decorated with bright embroidery and small round mirrors, it had a battered looking trunk. Oh, you and your appu, said her mother. That's not a regular henna pattern. But it can be, Jagga exclaimed, seeing the girl's face fall. Come, I'll make an appu on your hand. Roop threw a disbelieving look. Jagga smiled and a little shakily began to work on the elephant. And soon everyone was smiling. I want an elephant on my hand too, someone cried. It was a small boy. Jagga got busy again. After that, to their delight, customers poured in, all of them children accompanying their parents. Jagga drew more henna elephants on tiny palms, bears, even a rather convincing monkey. And when the brothers boarded the bus that would carry them back to their hut in the shanty town, Jagga's arms were aching. But he was walking on air. They had earned almost 500 rupees. How happy Ma would be. That was a really smart thing you did, Jagga. Roop slapped his back. Tomorrow, a new shirt for you. And a proper haircut. If we look neat and smart, people might ask us to come to their homes to decorate women's hands at weddings. That's where the real money is. And if we can prove we're really good, we could even make up to 7,000 rupees in a day. They say you can charge 5,000 rupees for the bride and 100 each for the other women. Imagine! Jagga grinned. His quiet brother was in unusually high spirits today. Hanumanji willing, maybe we will one day soon. And we'll buy a pair of jeans for Rani too, he said, the kind that girl was wearing. Jagga, Roop laughed. They were rich people. So what? Jagga replied. If we earn enough, our Rani can be as well dressed as anyone. Oh, let's buy some gulab jamuns, he cried, as his eye fell on the sweets, fat with syrup, in a nearby shop. Rani loves them. He stopped abruptly, remembering that Rani wasn't at home. We all love them, Roop said quickly. Let's take 6. Jagga sighed. But despite his gloom, as they rode home on the bus, he couldn't help dreaming. What if they could make this much money every day? They might even be able to forget that their father was in jail for the next 5 years. Rani could go to school. It didn't matter that both her brothers had to drop out. And suddenly, Sunita Masi didn't seem that much of a threat. It was almost 9 o'clock when they reached home. Traffic was always heavy in the city, and they had to walk some distance through the narrow lanes to reach their shack. The moment they entered, Jagga's face darkened again. The room felt so empty. Even his mother's cry of delight, "What? So much money?" failed to cheer him. He swallowed his dinner silently, even though Ma had cooked his favorite aloo curry, fiery with chilies. Then he pulled out his straw mat and spread it outside the hut. It was cooler there in the open. After a while, Roop joined him. Jagga covered himself with his worn cotton sheet and turned his back on Roop and tried to sleep. But his restless thoughts wouldn't let him. Was it really better for Rani to leave her own family so she could lead a more comfortable life. The breeze blowing gently against his hot cheeks suddenly turned harsh. It gathered up dust from the road, dried leaves, and bits of paper and flung them about. Then it tried to pull Jagga's sheet away. He sat up hurriedly, clinging to it. The wind was howling now, and Jagga groaned as the street lights beyond the basti blew out abruptly. Lightning crackled, then forked menacingly across the black sky, making his heart thump. The metal sheets roofing the other shanties set up a deafening rattle. A can fell over with a crash, and a baby began to wail. It's a dust storm, Roop screamed, bundling up his sheet. Get inside. Jagga was rolling up his mat when he noticed that the black plastic sheets that roofed the hut were flapping wildly. He gasped as one of the large stones that held them in place rolled off. Roop! Our roof! He flung down the mat and caught hold of the sheet. But the wind was going crazy. It tore the flimsy plastic out of his hands. Quickly, Roop grabbed the other end. Both boys struggled to keep the sheets in place. Ma hurried out to help too, but one by one all the stones rolled away and suddenly they were left with their roof in their hands. Praise Hanumanji, it didn't rain, Ma said, pouring tea into their glasses. The boys were in no mood to talk. A pale light was spreading over the basti and they could see destruction all around. I'm glad Rani wasn't here. Jagga put down his glass. His throat choked up so hard that he couldn't swallow. Yes, Rani was terrified of storms. Roop's dark face looked pinched as he stared into his tea. Finish your breakfast, Ma said, passing them more cold chapatis. We have to put the roof back. What else could they do? Jagga swallowed the dry chapatis and sprang to his feet. Come on, Roop, he said. We are lucky we could save the plastic sheets. Roop nodded. They gathered up all the stones they could find, then began to stretch the sheets over the walls, dragging the plastic cover over the roof beam. Ma held on from one side, Roop from the other, while Jagga climbed up to put the stones back. Here, here's another. Salma, their next door neighbor, held up a stone. Jagga smiled and thanked her. So you managed to save your sheets too? Not everyone was as lucky. What a night, Anand exclaimed from across the lane. Like them, he was up on his roof, his young daughters helping him to replace it. Glad to see you're still here, Roop, Anand's wife Lakshmi called out as she swept away the rubbish. I was afraid the storm might have blown you away. Too bad, Auntie, Roop grinned. I would have had a free ride to some exotic place. There was a burst of laughter from all the people busy repairing their damaged houses, and Jagga felt his heart lightening. We badly need to get metal sheets for the roof, Roop said as they waited for their bus. Yes, Jagga sighed. If we have another good day. And then someone called out, Roop, Jagga! It was Sunita Masi, seated in a rickshaw with a small curly-haired girl. Rani! Jagga yelled. What are you doing here? Rani jumped off the rickshaw and ran to him. This girl, Sunita Masi fumed. She's impossible. Why? Jagga frowned. She cried all night. She said she was scared of the storm and wanted to go home. But Rani, you were much safer in Sunita Masi's flat, Jagga cried. Do you know? He hesitated, then went on. Our roof blew off. In reply, Rani just clung to him. Weren't you leaving for Vaishno Devi today? Roop asked. We couldn't because of this silly girl, Sunita Masi replied. Rani, you missed a wonderful chance, Jagga said. I want to be with Ma and Roop Bhaiya and you, Rani pouted. Oh, you silly, silly girl, Jagga hugged her. Come, I think there's some gulab jamuns for you. And you know what? I'm going to draw a henna elephant on your hand. And many, many more elephants and peacocks, he thought happily. I do hope you enjoyed this heartwarming story. Thanks so much for listening.